Archaon is surely the quintessential bad guy of Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and now he has returned with an incredible new model as the exalted Grand Marshal of the Apocalypse. Now this miniature is epic and so of course deserves an epic painting tutorial. I'm going to show you everything that you need to know to paint your miniature and to get a fantastic result that you're going to be really proud of. So go grab your paints and brushes and we'll begin. Before we start doing any painting, I just want to quickly point out to you the sub-assemblies that I've made to make the painting process easier. The first of these is that I've completely built Dorgar, including the saddle, and that's because you can see some bits of his skin through the saddle, so if we keep all that together, we can paint all those parts at the same time. I've then completely built Archaon and glued him to a spare round base, and this is done with super glue thin, and really it's just to keep him steady whilst we're painting. Once we're finished, it'll be easy to snap him off this base and glue him to the rest of Dorgar to make the final assembly. The last parts I've kept separate are the birds, and this isn't because they're hard to paint, it's just that they're really fragile and I don't want to accidentally break them off when we're painting the rest of the miniature. So with all those sub-assemblies done, we're now ready to begin, and the first colour we're going to use is a Abaddon Black. Now it won't have escaped you notice that I've already undercoated the model with some Chaos Black spray, and you might be wondering then, why bother painting it black first? And the reason is, Abaddon Black has a different finish to it from Chaos Black spray. So later on, if we need to neaten up with Abaddon Black, having the whole model already painted with this colour means you won't spot the difference, whereas without it, you will see a difference between these two different sorts of black. So we're going to start out first of all, as always, by shaking the paint before we begin, and I'm going to be applying this colour using my extra large base brush because, well, there's no real finesse at this point. I just want to paint the entire miniature with this colour, so a large brush is ideal. And all you've got to do is get some of this paint on your brush, put it onto your palette, and then add a little bit of water to it to thin it down. Be careful when you're adding water using these large brushes because it is easy to absorb too much water into it. So you kind of want your paint to be looking like that before you begin. And all you need to do is get hold of your miniature and start painting this onto all the areas of skin that you want to be black. And well, you just need to make sure you paint all over it like this. And you might find as you're doing this, you missed some bits with the undercoat, and if you do, just make sure you paint those parts black at this point. I finished applying the base coat of Abaddon Black, and in fact I went a bit further. I didn't just focus on the skin, I've painted the entire miniature using it just to give us a really good solid base coat that'll be good for all the remaining colours. And the first of those areas of colour we're going to concentrate on doing is, well, the body, the largest part of it. So this is going to be the black scales that are on the back and the paler belly that's on the front. Now the first thing we're going to do for this is, well, highlight the black parts of the skin, and for that we need Eshin Grey, and this I'm going to be applying as a dry brush. So I've got my large dry brush here, and all I'm going to do is get some of this paint on the end of the brush, get some tissue, and use that to work the paint in amongst the bristles on the brush there like that. So it can be quite rough, but what you're looking to do is to make sure you've got very little of this paint left on the brush before you begin, and you can test it on the tissue. You want it to be kind of like that. And all you need to do is get a hold of your miniature, and then start lightly running your brush across the detail that you want to be highlighted for black. So the scales on the back, for example, all I'm going to do is start flicking my brush back and forth across it like that, so the paint catches the sharper details on all the raised parts. Now you're looking to do this on all the parts of the skin that are going to be black, so if you need a bit of guidance, just check out your box art, but you're looking at following all these parts such as the muscle and areas around here as well. Once you've finished building up that dry brush of Eshin Grey, we're ready to start painting in the colours for the paler part of the body. Now we're going to be focusing just on Dorgar's body here, not the wings. They're a little bit different and we'll come back to those later on. And what we need to do here, or the trick really, is to avoid getting a distinct line between the paler colours and the darker colours. And to do that, I'm going to be kind of sort of dry brushing and sort of stippling at the same time. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. Now the colour for doing this is Rakarth Flesh. I'm going to be applying most of it using my medium dry brush, but it's a good idea to have a small dry brush on hand as well whilst you're doing this, just for any smaller details that are tricky for this brush to get to. And what you need to do is, like with a dry brush, get your paint ready by using some tissue, working it in amongst the bristles, and leaving a little bit more paint on than you did before with the Eshin Grey. And what you're looking to do here is to pick a part to start on, and I'm going to begin on the tail because it's a great example here. And what you need to do is start quite roughly applying this to the areas that you want to be paler. So you can see as I put this on, it's not really giving me a solid block colour, it's being quite soft around the edges, which is perfect for that transition between the dark and the light. So what you need to do is just carry on working your way around the miniature, picking out all these parts like this, and getting that nice transition there. Don't worry about getting a solid colour because we're going to come back to it in a minute to do that. Now if you're unsure which bits to paint, then remember just check out your box art and that will guide you through which areas to pick out. Once you've finished dry brushing the paler colour and marking in where it's going to go, the next thing to do is just to strengthen it really. So I'm going to be using Rakarth Flesh once again, but this time I'm going to apply it with a medium base brush and I'm going to make use of my palette again to thin the paint down. So put some on there, add a small amount of water to it so it's nice and thin there like that. And make sure you don't have too much of this on your brush. And really what you're looking to do here is to paint this colour kind of in the middle of the areas that you dry brushed previously. So for example on the tail, I'm going to focus around the middle here, applying a base coat of this like that. And you see this makes the colour just a bit stronger in the middle. And well, with this done, we'll then set up later on to carry on this transition from the lighter colour to the darker colour. With the Rakarth Flesh applied, we've now established that paler colour on the belly. And the next thing to do is to, well, start marking in some red, because on the tails you'll notice there's quite a fiery glow. So we need to do that now, and we're going to do it in a similar way by dry brushing it. So the colour here is Mephiston Red, and I'm going to apply it with my small dry brush. And you basically get this ready in the same way that we have been doing so far with the dry brushes by using some tissue. But a word of warning with red paint in particular. This colour is very strong because it's got a lot of pigment on it. So this will linger on your dry brush after you've done this. And it's very important that you really thoroughly wash that brush because, well, that pigment will linger. And so later on when we start dry brushing with paler colours, it will come back and turn those colours pink. And well, that will ruin your model at that point if you start painting it with that colour. So be sure to thoroughly wash your brush after you've done this step. But just get your paint ready in the same way as we have been doing. And when you're set, all you've got to do is start applying this to the tail ends. So I'm going to start just down here. And what I'm looking to do is to focus this towards the middle of the tail. So you can see it's quite soft colour like that, which is perfect for the transitions that we're building up. And you're looking to leave it black around the edges, like you can see on the box cover. Now also, we need to bring it up onto the tail to help blend to the Rakarth Flesh. So you can see I'm just gradually bringing it further up like that, keeping it soft. So we've got a nice transition between the colours. And if you look at the box art, it doesn't go any further than that point there. So you're looking to get a nice transition in that kind of area there like that. Now you do exactly the same on the other tail, and if you want to as well, you can do this red in the centre on the back of each tail as well. Once you've finished dry brushing that red, we've now established all of the main colours for the skin and we're ready to start using some shade. And this shade's going to be used to help blend them all together. Now I'm going to start out with Agrax Earth shade for this, and I'm going to be applying a lot of it. So I'm going to use my large shade brush, and what you need to do is just build up a good puddle of this on your palette to begin with. So get a really good amount on there, and you can use this to control exactly how much is on your brush. So there we go. And what I'm looking to do here is to paint this focusing on all the parts that we did with Rakarth Flesh. So if I start on the tail once more, what I'm going to do is start applying it completely over the strong bits of Rakarth Flesh, but then going either side of it as the colour starts to fade out into that black. So there you go. So you're kind of going across the whole transition. And on the tail, it's quite a clear example because it's kind of like a diamond shape in the cross section. So you're basically just doing the front of it, and you want to go part way onto the red. But as you get closer towards the end of it, just let that colour kind of fade out. So make sure that you apply less and less of it as you go, using your brush like a sponge to get rid of the excess, so the shade kind of fades away as you get further away from it. Now, on areas where there's smoother skin, such as around the side of the body here, the same kind of thing's true. Keep the colour really strong on the solid Rakarth Flesh, and then as you get to that black, just apply it thinly to help it fade away there like that. Now keep an eye on this as it dries to make sure the shade doesn't start running and pooling anywhere. So just keep an eye on it as it does dry and give it about half an hour as well. If it does start pooling anywhere, once again just use your brush like a sponge to remove the excess shade. That Agrax Earth shade is now completely dry, and you can see it's just starting to help that blend between the lighter colours and the darker colours. And what we need to do now is, well, exactly the same thing on the red parts on the tails. So what we're going to do is the same technique, but this time using Nuln Oil. So I'm still using my large shade brush for this, and as before, I'm going to get a good puddle of this on my palette. You don't need quite so much this time though, because, well, this area is smaller than the rest of the whole body was. So use your palette as before to get some shade on your brush. And then all you need to do is start painting this over all the red parts on the tail, just going onto either side of it as well, there like that. And as before, as you get close to the transition where it goes to the Agrax Earth shaded areas there, just make sure the shade's a little bit thinner so it kind of just fades out as you go up that area there. With the Nuln Oil completely dry, you can see the reds darken down nicely and the blend's just starting to happen there as well. But we're not finished with the blend yet. We need to add some more shade just to help it out. So we're going back to Agrax Earthshade once more, but this time I'm going to be applying it using my medium shade brush because I want to be a little bit more focused about where exactly I'm putting this. So as before, I'm just going to build up a puddle of it on my palette, so I've got a good amount there, like that. Get a fair amount loaded on your brush, and what you're looking to do here is paint this just on the parts where the colour changes from the coloured parts towards the middle of the body to the black on the edges. So for example, where the Rakarth flesh is here, what I'm going to do is paint down this side here, just to help with that transition between the colours there like that. Now you do exactly the same when you get down to the red parts on the end of the tail, so still either side. You don't need to do where the red meets the Rakarth flesh because we've already been over that twice, so that's okay now. You're just looking at anywhere where it meets the black. And you do exactly the same thing when you get further up the body towards where it's a bit smoother. For example, on the leg here, just down that connection there between the two colours like that. And once you've done this, give the model about half an hour to dry completely before you move on to the next stage. The shade is now completely dry and you can see it's just helping bring all those colours together. Now if you do find at any parts you do have some difficulty bringing the colours together and some of it's still showing quite grainy from the dry brush, just remember you can put another thin coat of Agrax Earthshade over that part just to help smooth it out. And now what we need to do is start to re-establish the colours again. We're going to start out with the red on the tails using Mephiston Red. I'm going to dry brush it again, but this time I'm going to be using my small dry brush for it. And well, preparing this is exactly the same as what we did before. So use some tissue to work that paint into the bristles and make sure you don't have too much on there. And all you've got to do is focus this on the areas that we painted red previously. So in the middle of the two tails down here, I'm just going to very lightly dry brush it. Now you don't have to be quite so heavy as you were before because we already have that red to work from this time. So see, I'm being quite soft as to how I apply it, and I'm working up to that transition as well, very lightly going over that part there. Now remember, once you've finished doing this colour, be sure to thoroughly wash your brush because it's very important that all that red pigment is got out before we start the next colour, which is going to be a pale one. Once you're happy with the strength of that red, the next thing to do is, well, the same thing, but this time on the areas of Rakarth flesh. So we're going to go back to Rakarth flesh and still using the small dry brush. Remember, you need to make sure you get rid of all of that red pigment out of the brush, and you will notice at this stage on your tissue, if the paint starts to go a bit pinky, then you've still got some of that pigment there. So just wash your brush again and then start over. But you just need to get your paint ready as you would normally with a dry brush, and then very lightly start applying this colour to the areas of Rakarth flesh. So I'm going to start down here on the tail, and as with the red, I'm just going to very lightly start running the brush back and forth over it, just gradually building up the strength of that colour either side of the centre there like that. And I am going to go down to that transition to the red and just very lightly go over it there like that. So we're going back and forth a bit over that, and you can see now it's just brought those two colours together nicely. So just take your time working all the way around Dorgar now, doing this all over the Rakarth flesh areas. I've finished building up that Rakarth flesh to a point that I'm happy with, and you can see by keeping the dry brushing soft, I've got a nice smooth transition between all the colours. And now we're going to turn back to painting the black parts of the body, and we're going to be dry brushing those to highlight them. So I'm going to be using the Dawnstone dry paint for doing this, and I'm going to start out with my small dry brush, but it'll be a good idea to have a medium dry brush on hand as well for when you're doing the larger areas on the back of Dorgar. And what we're going to do is just get the dry brush ready like we have been doing. So a bit of tissue to work that paint in amongst the bristles of your brush. And then when you've got very little left on there, all you need to do is start lightly running this across the black parts of the skin. And I'm going to start around here near the tail, where I'm going to be using this smaller brush to just focus on these edges around here, where it's, well, more of a pure black. And then gradually going a little bit onto the Rakarth flesh, just so the two colours are touching there like that, to once again help with that smooth transition between all the colours. Now when you get to the areas where it's much more open, such as the back here, it's a good idea to switch to your medium dry brush for these areas because, well, obviously they're much larger and you'll get these parts painted much quicker that way. And with that dry brush now applied to all the black parts, the next thing to do is to go back to the pale parts of the skin, add another dry brush to those to lighten them yet further. And now we're going to be using Rack White to do this, and I'm going to be using my small dry brush all the way through it. And this time we want to be very almost delicate about how we apply this. So when you use your tissue, really make sure you get rid of most of that paint so that you can add this gradually. It's much easier to add more of this colour if you need to, but it's much harder to take it away again. So once you're ready, what you've got to do is start dry brushing this towards the middle of all the pale parts of the skin. So on the tails, for example, what I'm going to do is just very lightly, almost dust it, focusing towards the middle like that, just gradually building up the colour like that there, you see. Now, on the smoother areas of muscle further up on the body, it's the same kind of thing really. You just try and avoid the black areas and just focus towards the middle of these pale parts, just letting the brush catch all those raised details as you go over the muscles. And with that, we've finished dry brushing all of the skin, and we just need to add a few highlights now to finish it off. And we're going to first of all finish all the pale parts of it, and to do this we need pallid witch flesh. Now this time I'm going to be using my small layer brush to apply this colour, and what I'm going to do is make use of my palette, put some paint on there like that, and then I'm going to add some water to it. Not loads, just enough to thin that paint down so it's nice and smooth, so as we apply it to the miniature it'll give a nice smooth finish to the skin. So there we are, you want that sort of consistency, and make sure you don't have too much on your brush, so get rid of the excess and get a good fine tip on your brush. And what you're looking to do here is to follow all the sharper details on the skin. So a really obvious example of that is this central line that runs down the tail, so you just want to follow this all the way down till it just starts to fade out as we get to the red. But also we want to highlight these little details like the holes where the skulls are as we go along, around areas like that. Anywhere where it's just on the pale flesh. Avoid doing all the dark parts further down there. Now as for the muscles a bit further up, what we're looking to do here is again look for all the sharper details and follow them as we go along. So the neck's a great example of this. You can see the dry brushing's picked out some wrinkles. All I'm going to do is just add a bit more definition to some of these with a line of pallid witch flesh on each of them. And the same will be true on the boils on the Nurgle head. Just add a little bit of this colour, just those sharper bits towards the top there like that, just to bring those features out there like that. And with that highlight applied to all the pale parts of the skin, all we need to do now is the same to the black parts. And now for this we're going to be using Administratum Grey, and I'm still going to be using my small layer brush to apply it because, well, the technique is just the same as what we did for the pale parts. So using your palette, once again, thin your paint down with a bit of water so it's flowing nice and smoothly. Make sure you don't have too much on your brush. There we go. And when you're ready, you're just looking for the really sharp parts on the detail, which, well, generally are these spikes. So on the side of the tail, for example, we've got these areas running all the way around the side. All you need to do is paint a small amount of this colour just on those edges there. Just give that a bit of sharpness on the corners. Now the same is true on the upper body as well, in which case if we look at the arm for example, I'm just going to paint a small amount of this colour just on these edges here, just these sharp parts. You don't have to go all the way around, just the very ends of them. And with that fine highlight applied to all the black scales, the vast majority of the skin for Dorgar is actually done now, and we can start painting some smaller details on it. Now the first of these we're going to do is to paint the fiery effect that appears on both tail ends. And to do it, we're going to start out with a layer of Troll Slayer orange to begin the effect, and then we're going to glaze it with Bloodletter, but we're going to do this twice, and this will start to give us a nice real red feel to the whole area. Then we're going to go back to Troll Slayer orange to begin brightening it up once again, then Fire Dragon Bright, and we'll finish off with a very small amount of Uriel Yellow to complete the effect. But starting out with Troll Slayer Orange, I'm going straight to my small layer brush to apply this right from the beginning. And as usual, I'm going to make use of the palette to thin the paint down so it's flowing nice and smoothly. And you want it to be kind of that kind of consistency before you begin. And get a good amount loaded on your brush, get that good fine tip. And when you're ready, you just need to, well, try and angle the model so it's going to be comfortable for you to do this. So I'm sort of going to try and work my hand in there. There we go. And what I'm looking to do is to paint a line down the central part of the tail as neatly as possible there like that. And you can see this colour is quite thin, so I will be applying 2 thin coats of it to build up the colour of it. It doesn't need to be too thin a line because you want to get a good amount of orange on there. And you're looking to go up to about this kind of distance really, close to that transition between the 2 areas of colour there. Now also you want to paint this orange going out into little spurs, going out towards the spikes on the edge of the tail, so make sure to catch each of those. And again you will need to do 2 coats to build up that colour. And also down here on the tips of the tails, as it gets kind of like towards this hair area here, just want to paint these bits with orange as well, leaving a small amount of the red showing towards the end of each of these parts. Once you've finished building up that orange, the next thing to do is to apply a glaze of Bloodletter using your medium shade brush. And what this is going to do is just build up that reddish hint across the whole tail. So you can see I'm even painting onto the black areas just to help give kind of a fiery glow, which you'll see build up as we go. And I'm going to be working down very close to that transition to around about there, just keeping the glaze very thin around that. And I'll be doing all of the parts on as well. Now once this coat's dry, I'm going to apply the second one in exactly the same way, and you'll see that by doing that you just build up the strength of the red. With With that second coat of glaze completely dry, we're now back to Troll Slayer orange and the small layer brush to reapply some of this orange, but this time just down the centre of the tail. So that central spine, I'm just going to paint the line just running all the way down it this time to make that orange just a bit stronger towards the middle of the tail. Now on these hairs at the end here, what I'm going to do is just focus on some of the raised parts of it, towards the base of it really, so not going all the way up this time, just leaving some of the redder orange we've got from the glaze just showing in the recessed parts in between them. Next we're going to add Fire Dragon Bright, and this is applied in the same kind of way. So still with a small layer brush, I'm just going to focus on that central spine of the main tail all the way along here, and on the actual hairs on the end, I'm just going to be a little bit more focused towards the base of these hairs. So just kind of this area down here, again just painting on the raised parts and leaving the darker reddish orange in the recesses. And finally, add some Uriel yellow to each of the tails. And for this, all you're looking to do is start at the base of the hairs in the end and just paint a line just running part way along this spine in the centre to around about there. And once done that on each of these tails, they'll be complete. And there we are, the fire effect on the tails is now complete. Now the next detail to paint on the skin is actually some red parts of it, and these are on the hooves, and to do them we just need 3 colours. We're going to start with a base coat of corn red, then we'll shade completely over the area using Nuln Oil, and once that's completely dry we'll add a highlight of Wazdaka red. But starting out with our base coat of corn red, I'm going to use my medium base brush to apply this because it's not a very intricate area to paint this, so a larger brush is good for it. So as usual, use your palette, thin your paint down so it's nice and smooth, about that kind of consistency there. And all you've got to do is start base coating these areas. And the bones I'm talking about are these ones here, just above the actual hoof there. So you just need to base coat this area, and you will need to apply 2 thin coats. With the base coat applied, the next thing to do is to add some shade. So we're going to use Nuln Oil for this, and I'm using the medium shade brush, and I'm just going to apply this all over the red areas. Now if you want the final red to be darker, you can add a second coat of this if you want to. Just be sure the first coat is completely dry before you do so. I decided to apply that second coat of Nuln Oil, and you can see it's given me a really dark red. And now that that's completely dry, I can add a highlight. So I'm using Wazdaka red with my small layer brush, and what I'm looking to do here is to paint a line along all the edge, all the way around of these bone details. So as neatly as possible. You can see how I'm angling my brush just so that the edge catches that corner of the detail like that, and it gives me a nice sharp straight line really easily. Now also I'm going to be highlighting these little ridges in the bone just down here by keeping my hand as steady as possible and just painting along that raised detail there like that. And with that highlight applied, we've now finished those red bony plates on Dorgar's body. Now there are still some more little details left to do on the body, but we have actually done the vast majority of it. So we're now going to turn our attention to the next big feature, which is going to be how to paint Dorgar's wings.